Oh, fuck me. Water tastes so fucking good. I gotta change my lifestyle. Anyway, myself being a gamer, I'm always faced with this particular question every time I play a game, in particular a game that ends with a number greater than 1. And that question being, which game is better? The original game that started our particular series, or its aptly numbered sequel ending in 2. And there's various cases where the sequel of the game ultimately does better in every single regard, whether it be God of War and God of War 2, Assassin's Creed and Assassin's Creed 2, Metal Gear Solid and the diversive Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. In my opinion, Kingdom Hearts to Kingdom Hearts 2, me being a fan of Kingdom Hearts 2 more than Kingdom Hearts 1, Red Dead Redemption 2, the sequel, it's actually a prequel somehow. That started to kick off a trend. And various other games. But the game in question for today's topic, in which I don't know. It juggles my mind a lot because I tend to think about this game series a lot recently. And that's Dead Space and Dead Space 2. Oh, yes, I forgot about another game on the list. I cannot forget Uncharted 2, if Uncharted 2 being a fucking masterpiece through. But back to Dead Space. Let's just call it what it is. I think everyone will most likely agree that Dead Space 2 is an overall better version of Dead Space 1. Except maybe one thing. Depending on how you play the game, it does feel easier in various aspects. Between the slight bump in various weapon mechanics, the altering fires, the better stopping power of, say, the pulse rifle, Isaac being overall more nimble and faster, especially with his stomps and melee attacks, the revamped stasis, with it being able to recharge, etc., etc. In some cases, it does feel like Dead Space 2 is slightly more action-packed, but not like Resident Evil 5, in my opinion, where they dialed up the actionist all the way to 11. No, wait, sorry, I got the numbers all fucked up. Resident Evil 6. That one was a piece of shit because of the increased, action. And personal beef with 6, I don't know, maybe other people didn't go through this, but with me at least, it was fuck all impossible to get ammo in that game. And since it billed itself as an action game as opposed to more survival, it really felt like they thought about the action late in the game and dialed up the responsiveness of the enemies and gave them guns without tweaking the survival bit they had in there early on. Could just be me, but I had a fucking hard time playing Resident Evil 6. Towards Chris's campaign not giving me enough ammo and them being bullet sponges, and fucking Christ, as soon as I got to Jacob's campaign, or Jake's, whatever the fuck, Wesker's fucking kid, I remember whenever, like, the plane crashed. I know there was a plane segment there. Crashed in the fucking snowy mountains. As soon as I saw flying enemies and I checked my ammo counter, I said, nope, not playing this game. Now, that was about several years ago. I've improved a bit, I think. Maybe I'll have a better time, but I'm definitely not going to find out now. Fuck, just out of curiosity. I do have 6, and it's been 3 years since I've played it on Steam for only 70 minutes. That's telling. But I'm not talking about Resident Evil. Dead Space. Topic of the video. Which game is better? That was the question that started all when I asked myself this random question, being the wacko that I am. Which one's better? Dead Space 1 or Dead Space 2? And there's obviously a clear winner. Yeah, I'm going to kill myself in terms of time here. But yeah, Dead Space 2 is the winner. With the aforementioned gameplay improvements, there's a lot more shit. The environments are fucking spectacular. I think the sprawl as the ideal location for Dead Space 2 is amazing. The various chapters are spaced rather nicely. It was one of the first few games I remember playing that implemented the whole loading in backgrounds. I know a lot of games during that time later on took advantage of that whole idea of, gameplay loading in the background during various segments. Did Metal Gear... No, Metal Gear Solid didn't do that. I know there's another game that utilized that type of technique. But, alas, it was one of the first games I played, and yes, it was obvious, they had to hide the loading screens behind, various cinematics or, behind elevators. But it worked out well because you could basically have a seamless experience from start to finish. And from what I've heard, they're trying to do that with the remake for Dead Space 1, so that's really cool. The weapons still felt great. They definitely tweaked them again so they can have different alternate fire so they could actually be a lot more useful, even though you could still play for the whole game with just the plasma cutter. And even the story wasn't too bad. Chief among them, Isaac now has a voice. He's no longer mute. He has a little bit more action and directive compared to most mute characters that just follow orders. And it works well. Gunnar Wright is a great fucking voice for Isaac Clarke, and him just exploring through the sprawl. First trying to, work with some sort of random bitch who calls him. Turns out to be a bad guy. Spoiler. And, yeah, it all falls apart from there with them just trying to, 1 minute get the fuck off of it, and Isaac decides to face it head on and go, nah, I'm gonna fucking end this shit once and for all. It just works out really well. As I said before, the environments are great. I have no problem with any of the chapters, locations, except maybe towards the end, like the mining section. That one I usually don't like, but everything else I loved it. I loved the opening segments in the city sections, like the commerce areas. The Cassini Towers were great. The morgue was also pretty good leading up there. The fucking babysitting bit. Oh god, that was a fucking another one. The solar panel section, just all of it. The environments were great, the story was amazing, the gameplay felt slightly more fast-paced and action-packed, but still had a sense of some horror, but given if you played the original, you kind of know where it's going, it won't really frighten you as much. The graphics did get a bump up as well. In some cases, I still think the graphics did look unique in certain areas in Dead Space 1, but Dead Space 2 was still a decent bump after a couple years. And the length was also just right. You can easily beat it within a several-hour time span if you, don't die that much and you know what you're doing. And the replay value is a lot better compared to the first one. At least with the second one, you have, unlockables. You have, like, an extra weapon you can unlock for being on the hardest difficulty level, and even extra fucking suits you can unlock that you can use for your future playthroughs. Via an unintended glitch, it seems. But, yeah. Sum of it all, Dead Space 2 is the better game. But the answer isn't as clear-cut as that or definitive. Yes, Dead Space 2 is better in all regards to Dead Space 1. But that doesn't mean Dead Space 1 is a failure. This is more of a case of they're both equally great, but overall, 1 is probably more preferred. Meaning 2 is more preferred than 1. But 1 is still great, because it's what started out the whole fucking series. Yes, the graphics do look semi-dated. It definitely does look like a PS3 game. But, even then, it's still a gorgeous game with the set pieces on the Ishimura, the futuristic, technological, you know, appeal that has, and the slow transformation of the ship turning like some sort of organic mess full of necromorphs, the mystery behind how they were formed, all the extra backstory you can get through the audio logs, and just the horror of it yourself. No doubt, if you've never played Dead Space, you go to, you'll definitely get a few jump scares that are worthy of it. But I will confess, going through it again, the environments can be a little bit, you know, what's the term? Not disheartening, a drag. Because there's definitely some areas in Dead Space 1 that I do kind of feel like I do not want to be here, because that's one of the problems, I think, with Dead Space 1, is that you do have to go back to a couple of areas, and some of the areas aren't bad. But I definitely do hate the beginning chapter, the first one, the ending, because it was all just like a transport mission for the marker. And I think it was the one mission where you're in the mining segment, the mining area, where you have to strap like an SOS beacon to an asteroid and launch it. That was another horrible one. There were some environments that just didn't really appeal to me that much, and when I go through those chapters again, it is a little bit of a drag. But even so, it's like the lore building of Dead Space 1, and that whole idea that it was like a homage to those sci-fi alien horror games, it hits it on the nail right there. When you play Dead Space, you think of none other than fucking Alien. Except, you know, in this case, you're given a fighting chance, and you can just fucking cut through the motherfuckers. It works. But alas, both games are great, but I still think Dead Space 2 is the better game. The sequel is better in more ways than one. But of course, you want to supplement the story and see where it all began. You will not regret playing Dead Space 1. Ugh. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about that. Yeah, good game. Can't really think of anything else. They just improve upon everything. That's it. Chant, you know what the fuck it is. Let me know what you think is the best Dead Space game, because obviously I only listed 1 and 2 because those are the ones that I played the most religiously. Didn't play much of Extraction because that was on the PlayStation 3, and I'm not really a huge fan of on-rail shooters. Ignition was just a shitty fucking minigame. That's probably like the only thing that I dislike about Dead Space 2 is there are some story elements that are locked behind having to download a minigame. But there are ways to fix that on the PC version, thank Christ. And Dead Space 3, you know, well, that was kind of the game that killed the series, sadly. So, can't really give that one much props. But yeah, Dead Space 2, heavyweight champion. Which means, you know, similar to what happened with the Destroy All Humans remake, and it seems, you know, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, I do wonder, when Dead Space 1 remake comes out, will we get a Dead Space 2 remake? And given, like Dead Space 1, it does show that it's dated, but like when you compare, say, Resident Evil 2 on the PS1 to Resident Evil 2 remake, yes, that's a justifiable remake. Last of Us 1, Last of Us Part 1, fuck no, that's a cash grab. Resident Evil 2, the Resident Evil 2 remake, that's justifiable, even though we lost some shit as a result. Dead Space 1 to Dead Space remake, that one is slightly questionable. I will confess that, because unlike Resident Evil 1, where the tank controls are definitely outdated and cumbersome, the graphics what? It's like 60 by 60p resolution, whatever the fuck it is. Yes, Dead Space 1 isn't that bad because it was, it was inspired by the over-the-shoulder camera gameplay from Resident Evil 4. So that gameplay is still sound after so many fucking years. I mean, for Christ's sake, they're releasing a DLC for Resident Evil 8 that gives you the third-person fucking perspective. It'll be nice playing through that game as Ethan Winters in third person. Even though they're still gonna turn that fucker's head. Let me see his face, for Christ's sake. Let me see my beautiful boy, Ethan Winters. But yes, I don't know how the Dead Space 1 remake will go. I pray that it will be liked by everyone, because just seeing some of the demo wheels and like just all that shit, it's looking to be a really good game. It's looking to be really good, especially some of the new dismemberment features they have, changing the zero-G gravity segments to like the shit from Dead Space 2. And it looks like on the rig at least, or maybe a new meter for something. I can only imagine what that will be. The new system for Isaac. Spoiler, I guess. They're bringing Gunnar right back to voice the fucking mute bastard. So that's fucking amazing. Like, that may be like a point of contention for some, but you know what? I think it'd be nice to get like a better perspective as to how Isaac is feeling during these events. Because, like, everyone else is freaking out, and he's just like, he's just mute. He's not saying anything. In this regard, it'll be nice to see, how the fuck he, reacts like the first necromorph popping out of the fucking vent in the flight lounge and attacks his fucking buddies. It'll be nice to see how he fucking reacts. But going off that, there's a new Alive system where he'll actually dynamically, like talk in various states, depending on if he's wounded or if he's exhausted or if he's scared, shit like that. That's kind of interesting too. Like, there's a bunch of interesting mechanics that'll help liven the game and make it a lot more beautiful. And I'm excited for it. Given my junk here will probably never be able to run it, I'll be amazed if I can even fucking run it 30 FPS, let alone, 62K Ultra? Bye-bye ray tracing. But yeah, if the remake does well, what will that mean for a Dead Space 2 remake? I would like to think that it'll happen, because it seems like this is a trend now in this, starved industry, similar to the movie industry, because they're just remaking and reusing old plot threads and shit from other movies. They're kind of doing the same thing with video games, because the video game industry is just as fucking starved. So the fact that they're even making a remake to Dead Space is actually kind of surprising, considering, EA has been all about, single-player games are dead, Like, whoever these guys that are making the remake, whoever's dick they had to suck higher up, I gotta commemorate them. But yeah, the Dead Space 2... Personally, I hope it is remade. Because with how the Sprawl looks and how that game looks aesthetically, I would love to see that get more of a fucking facelift as opposed to Dead Space 1. But there are some, not as many concerns, because assuming that Dead Space 1 is a par-by-par remake similar to Destroy All Humans. Because the thing with Destroy All Humans remake is that was through and through the exact same thing, minus one line of dialogue was changed, I think. I can't recall. And, obviously the art style was a little bit changed up. But beyond that, Dead Space 1 remake, I think, is through and through the exact same game, minus a couple of, gameplay improvements. Awesome. Destroy All Humans 2 remake, or Reprobed, that looks like it's going to be a similar case. So I'm hoping, with Dead Space 1 remake, and if it happens, a Dead Space 2 remake, it's more or less the same games, a couple new gameplay enhancements, And as they were saying, tying in the other properties of Dead Space to enhance the lore, that would be fucking awesome too. I just hope it doesn't turn into something like Resident Evil 4 Remake, which I'm actually am scared about because they're like changing a couple things from what I've been hearing from rumors. And it's got me more worried about that with the tone because, again, Resident Evil 4 to me was more of a campy experience. Macho, like cheesy one liners, shit like that. Still had some survival to it, but it added a twist to it to make it a little bit more lighthearted, not as serious as past Resident Evil games. But in terms of Dead Space 2, I would want it, but I won't be upset if they decide not to follow through with it because just like a couple of olden games, like Resident Evil 4 or Metal Gear Solid 2 or even fucking Uncharted, I think they're just fine the way they are. If anything, just give me a remaster. Spice up the fucking graphics a little, add in some higher quality textures, improve the frame rate, the resolution. That's all you fucking need. You don't really need that much from those type of games. They don't need a remake. Just make them more available on more platforms or make them actually runnable. But of course, if the Dead Space 1 remake adds shit, doesn't ruin the original content, and it still has that old Dead Space charm of making you shit your fucking pants against the Necromorph Horde, you know what? I'll be equally as excited when a Dead Space 2 remake comes out because that game will look even fucking better than Dead Space 1. Especially with, if they add even more gameplay improvements. Oh, God, sign me the fuck up. But this dragged on a little bit longer than I anticipated, especially since I was, just talking about which game was better. But, that's all I want to ramble about for now. Get it out of my head here. Yeah, I already said the chant bit like fucking 10 minutes ago. Whoops. Scrambled mind, what can I say? Usual chant, that's all I'm gonna say. Manager signing off. Yeah, stay safe, y'all. Bye.